Well, hi everybody, Father Alex here. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. I'm the Vicar of St Matthew's Church. I'm the host of our Daily Bread from August to the Altar, and a member of the Church of England General Synod. My guest this week on the Godcast is Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. Baroness Tanni is a Paralympian, a multi-winning medal athlete. She's Baroness in the House of Lords. She's a key public speaker and she's got a great story to tell. We're going to cover lots of things, so I do hope you enjoy the interview. And if you do, then please do share it or maybe subscribe to the channel. But for now, please enjoy this interview with Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, who doesn't really need an introduction, but Tanni, you are a lady that inspires me. So I'm really it's a real privilege to get you on the podcast. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've just been chatting briefly before we started. You're down in London, but that's not home, is it? Just share with people where you normally chill out and reside.
So I live in the northeast of England, and I grew up in Cardiff, so I work in Cardiff as well, so I still spend a bit of time there. So I spend most of my life doing a triangle of the country. But yeah, the House of Lords commitment is pretty full on. So, I'm normally down here 4 and increasingly 5 days a week.
Yeah. You and I have one day. No, I was just looking you up earlier. Your birthday is on the 26th of July, I think,
Yes, it is.
1969,
Yeah.
and my birthday is on the 27th of July, 1969. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes think at this kind of stage of life that, gosh, it's all gone so quickly. Are you a lady that likes to look back, or are you a lady that prefers to look forward?
Uh, I don't really spend too much time looking back because there's too many things that I want to do. And especially in Westminster, in the role I have in the House of Lords, you're always kind of having to look forward about what we're going to do next, what's the next bit of legislation, next bill, what we're trying to change, what we're trying to not change. So no, I don't spend much time looking back. I mean, I only really talk about my sporting career. I don't really think about it until people ask me specific questions on it. And I sort of, I don't wake up every day thinking about what I did in sport. So it's kind of quite interesting. I'm probably mostly a glass half full type of person, and somebody who is always looking to do what next. I'm not very good at sitting around doing nothing.
No, no, me neither. Well, when you do look back, Tanny, um, who were your kind of role models in your sporting kind of journey? Well, because I worked for Argos for a number of years, and we'll perhaps cover later. But I know you're a key speaker. I've been in lots of conferences where wonderful sports people have told me about how they became the great sports person that they became. But you for really, Tanya, you were a trailblazer, weren't you, for sports disability? Who were your role models as a girl?
So I was lucky. I grew up in Cardiff, and we had an athlete that lived actually not too far from me called Chris Hallam, and he was amazing because he won the London Marathon. So when I was 12, I remember watching him on TV and thinking, "Oh wow, this is what I want to do one day." I want to do the London Marathon. And I remember telling my mother, and she was like, "Yeah, okay, lovely, go for it." All the right kind of things. I don't think she actually thought that one day I would turn up and actually do the London Marathon. I mean, 6 years after I told her I was going to do the London Marathon, I was on the start line. So I was really lucky that he was like a really big deal. But in Wales, we've got our own media, our own TV. It's a bit, I guess, a bit like an English region, but it's we see it as national. So having that, brought it really close to home about what it takes to be a wheelchair athlete and to be successful. And then sort of over the years, I got to know Chris. I trained with him. He helped me massively in my own sporting career. So, growing up, I didn't really see many disabled people because disabled people were locked away. They were institutionalized either in school or in care homes. So the sort of the positivity I had around me was really good. A lot of it came from my parents as well. They were very positive about me being a wheelchair user at a time when lots of people were quite negative about it.
What was your peer circle like? I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and schools are invariably quite cruel places. Was your friendship circle supportive of you, or was it a challenge as a young disabled person?
Um, no, I think in school it was great, pretty positive to be honest. But there was experiences outside of school which were negative. So I was 5 years old when the first person stopped me in the street and asked me why my parents hadn't terminated the pregnancy.
Really?
And me
Gosh,
having to say to mum, what's abortion?
gosh.
Um, because this person felt it was completely okay to ask me that. Uh, you know, um, but I think my parents, were very grounded and they had quite strong faith. So that helped them a lot. And in terms of sort of finding a balance and protecting me. So, you know, um, my mum was asked the question once. I mean, she was asked this about whether she ever would have terminated the pregnancy. And, it was a very different time for disabled people. And there were no diagnostics back then. And she said, we had a really close relationship. She said, with the pressure as well, a huge pressure. I mean, this pressure still exists. That if she'd known I was going to be born disabled, she may have considered it. She never said, good, she would. And also, there's people who got very upset by that. But my mum never said to me, having had you and known you, we wished we'd terminated the pregnancy. And those things are really different. But there is still huge pressure to terminate disabled children,
Mm.
or to not carry on, or, debates we're having about that at the moment. The fact that you can still terminate a disabled fetus up to birth, most people don't realise. And I think, there are some really worrying things that we're doing at the moment, and not least other bits of legislation that I'm working on, which is pretty tough as well, about end of life. So I think I was very lucky. My parents were very balanced and very supportive.
Were you ever, and just tell me to shush if I'm prying too much, but were you ever angry as a teenager? I mean, teenagers have this, you go through adolescence, don't you? And generally just angry. Were you ever angry at your disability, Tanny, or were you always kind of, you kind of just accepted the cards you were dealt?
Um, no, I don't think I was angry. I got angry if people treated me differently. I still do get, a bit fed up with it, but I can't change it. It's not my fault. I didn't, it's beyond my control. I didn't have a traumatic accident. I didn't do something a bit daft and end up as a wheelchair user. So, I can't blame myself for my actions. And there's nothing I can do about it. There is no cure for me. Um, if they ever get to the point of being able to cure someone with a spinal cord injury, for a very, and we're not close to it yet, for a very long time, it'll be people within minutes of having the spinal cord injury. It's not going to be, I think if something happened to my spine repaired, I don't have any muscles in my legs. I don't, you know, you wouldn't just suddenly get up and walk. So no, I just think I'm like, uh, nothing I can do. So why spend too much time? There's there's a lot of time to reflect on the things I can do, not the things I can't do.
And what about the competitive instinct, Tanny? Was that always there, or did you need to get on a track for that to kind of explode and think, right, I'm not going to be a fun runner, I'm going to be a serious competitor? Just share a bit about that.
Um, I think it was always there. I mean, it's that kind of nature nurture thing which is fascinating. So, um, my mum, me, my sister, my daughter are quite strong-willed. My mum used to joke. She used to say that the two of us were we reeds, sorry, that blew in the wind. Sorry, I'll start again. Reeds that blew in the wind that acquiesced to everyone's wishes but our own, which is so far from the truth. So that used to be a bit of a joke between us. No, that competitive element's there. I think it's there in a very different way in my sister and daughter. But that drive is there, and I think that's kind of probably quite a lot of nature as well. Um, so I think I just had to find the right outlet in which to be competitive. That was the thing. And for me, that was wheelchair racing.
And when that leads to the career that you have, how does that sit with you now? I mean, you won the lot Tanni, didn't you? There wasn't really much left to win, was there?
No, I mean, there's quite a few races I didn't win, but no, I kind of did pretty well. I don't know. You kind of take each 4-year cycle as it comes, and we used to train 12 to 15 times a week, 50 weeks of the year. My wedding was based around my competition schedule. The birth of my daughter was. We had a cutoff date for being pregnant to fit in with my training season. So, you take those things a little bit for granted when you're in a system, and it's only when you're outside that you think, okay, maybe that's not completely balanced. But I had amazing training partners, really good coaching, and what I was good at doing was I was good at making myself train hard, and I was also, good at training smart. And you need natural talent, but you need to be able to make yourself do the things you're not good at, and that's where you get the real improvements. So I could push, you know, my top speed was incredibly quick, but getting to my top speed was always a bit of a struggle. So, every day in training, we used to do starts and pickups to get better. So yeah, I saw lots of very talented athletes who only did bits of the things they needed to do, where I think I was pretty just good at, doing everything. It's the chair design, the training, the sleep, everything else. I was pretty good across all those things. And then the results happen.
The thoroughbred athletes often talk about the fine margins, and again, hawking back to my August days, I remember Sir Clive Woodward uh, giving an incredible talk to 200 managers or whatever it was about how it all starts with the stockings, and he was alluding to the fact that, if we're a team, we've got to look, we've got to identify as a team. And
Mm.
also Adrian Morehouse was somebody else who did a wonderful talk. He won in lane, I think his group's called Lane 7 or something, and he won the medal from Lane 7. Just share a little bit about the fine margins, Tanni. You've alluded to it there a bit about you know, is that a difficult aspect of honing that skill to make sure the fine margins are being taken care of?
Um, no, I enjoyed it. So I'm a bit of a control freak. So, that was all part of being good at sport. We now call it marginal gains. When I was competing, it was just called being good at sport. Um, so, it's not just the training, it's the aerodynamics of the chair. It's, you know, my husband bought me 5 meters of Russian aluminium, which was weighed less
Mm,
than other same sort of diameter tube um, aluminium, to build a racing chair. And it's all those things because, my race weight was 45 kilos, so for that, you have to be pretty careful what you eat and, how you train and be healthy and maintain that. So for me, all those bits were really critical and I enjoyed all those bits. And some of those bits are as important as the training that you do on the road. I mean, also, I always trained with a men's training group so that everyday training was hard, and they just pushed me around the road and make my life difficult, and just pushed me really hard. Because then when you got to a race, and you know we had sort of racing teams, sort of loose coalitions between athletes. It might not be based on what country you're from, but if you've got 3 or 4 athletes trying to gang up on you in a pack, you need to find your way out of it. So for me, training with the men all the time gave me that because, in every training session, they could make my life hard. And I love that, because then when you get to a race, you've been in that situation 50 times, not in a really important race, trying to figure out how you get out of the middle of a pack because you haven't done it before.
mm. And my goodness me, like I said, your medal shelf must be um, swelling. Is it easy to pick out highlights in those moments, Tanni, or is it a whole body of work that you consider it? Are there any kind of real kind of mountaintop moments that you think, oh wow, that was just incredible?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, I messed up my 800 meters final in Athens, which was my last game. So I came back and won the 100, which was my weakest event. That was pretty special. Uh, I think my first Paralympics where I won a bronze in the 400, that was probably still one of the best races I've ever done. In terms of, I wasn't expected to win or anything, but, I did well. And there's loads of different, and there's moments away from the track as well. moments when you're with your teammates. I remember one of the games, it was the last night, we're sitting in the dining hall sits like 2,500, 3,000 people, and we're all sitting around, late at night having a coffee. Um, and it's one of those things that one of the athletes, they used to have a conveyor belt that took the trays into the kitchen to be cleared up. One of the athletes decided to get on the conveyor belt and go into the kitchen, which seemed really funny until he actually got into the kitchen and all the kitchen staff screamed and armed police came running down. So we still kind of talk about that many years on. So there's different moments. We never did awful stuff, but you have these sort of special moments, which are, it's not just about field of play. It's about all the other things that happened around field of play.
Yeah. And what about when it all stopped, Tanni? I've had numerous sports people on. Paul Stewart, the ex-Tottenham striker, is somebody that stands out who talked about the real struggle for him
Mm.
losing that buzz, that Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock feeling.
Mm.
Did you get any of that, or was it pretty transient for you to just?
Um, I spent a lot of time planning my transition out. So at the end of every year, my father used to say to me, right, you haven't got any money, you haven't got a pension, you spent it all traveling the world. What are you going to do when you grow up? So I spent a lot of time thinking about and what that retirement would look like. But also, you could get injured, and your career's gone, or you could get deselected, your career's gone. So I always wanted to be in control of what next. So my plan actually was I was going to do law conversion. Um, and then I did lots of other things when I was competing, and I had the chance to come to the House of Lords. So, um, also, I've just got no regrets. But I think it's really important that you have something that fills that gap. So that, the biggest crowd I competed in front of was 110,000 people, and nothing will top that. That's pretty special.
Mm.
But you kind of also don't want it to. So I think a lot of sports people really struggle to think about life beyond sport. But for me, it was part of so much of what I did was thinking about what next.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's because Dave Moorcroft said to me many years ago, "You're a long time retired." And I think that's also, and important to remember. And also in my sport, I didn't make enough money to never work again. So, maybe if I was in that position, it might have been a bit different. But, you're conscious that you've got to pay the bills as well when you stop
Mm.
competing. So, there are all these things that, you know, kind of fitted around.
You know, Tanni, the thing that's going in my mind is that this lady that I'm talking to is not just a champion for people with disability, but you're a champion for people. I'm very proud of my working class roots. I'm very proud, Lancastrian from Burnley, that because after your sporting career, it didn't stop, did it? And you go on to be decorated. Am I right in saying it was a CBE? And then you've got all this media and television, and now you're in the lofty heights of the House of Lords. It's an
Yeah.
incredible journey, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, you don't compete to get an MBE or anything like that, but then you're very fortunate if you get them. So I got an MBE and OBE, then I was a DBE, some Dame. So I'm a Dame and a Baroness, which is all a bit weird explaining to anyone who's not British. Well, it's weird explaining to anyone who's British what they mean. Um, so they're really lovely things. There's no responsibility that comes with being a dame. You know, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a baroness. I'm in my office at the moment, and you're kind of conscious every day you walk in the building, you're here to do a job. And it sounds very grandiose, but everything we do in this building affects what happens from before you're born till after you're dead. So that weight of responsibility is always there.
And if we can just touch on a couple of those things, I mean, there's a few things I'd like to ask. One is, we talked, you mentioned briefly before we met about your place as an agnostic. Um, how do bishops sit with you, sitting in the House of Lords? Are you comfortable with that?
I am, yeah, absolutely. And I probably before I came here, I'm not sure I would have said that. So, I grew up in a family of faith, but I'm not. Um, and I think before I came here, I would have thought, well, why are they here and not? we actually have 28 different religions represented in the House of Lords in different ways. And actually, I think when you come here, you realize that actually listening to different people's views is really important. So we've all got really strongly held views in Lords. That's why we're here. Um, but actually, the biggest strength is you listen and you sense check what you believe all the time. And so, through my time working, with many of the bishops over different things, you come to realize that they have a huge contribution to make. And now, we have, our first female Archbishop of Canterbury, and amazing. And, I'm old enough to know that, women weren't allowed to be vicars or, just it didn't happen. And, that transformation within my lifetime has been, absolutely amazing, in terms of pushing towards equality.
Yeah, and I absolutely rejoice with the new Archbishop of Canterbury being, well, first and foremost being an outstanding bishop and being female. But in my quarters, I've received an awful lot of uh, angst and anger the thought of a female archbishop, and I'm the spawn of Satan and all that. It just plays into the. I mean, it is. I mean, if it wasn't funny, it'd be awful because I mean, I think when you are a public figure, you've got to be thick-skinned. But it just shows you that nobody. I'm interested to know your thoughts, Tanny, because it seems nobody can seem to have an opinion without it being criticised or being, the vitriol. I've never known a time like it. What's the kind of vibe in the House of Lords as we see what's happening in our country at this moment in time?
Wow. I mean, generally, the House of Lords is very polite. We've got a lot of rules around how we speak in the chamber. So, we can't call
I
each
mean,
other.
in the coffee shop. I mean, in the
I mean, the
coffee
coffee shop. Oh, well, yeah, but I think even the chamber's getting a little bit more fraught because we're having a huge amount of legislation chucked at us. We're doing really long nights. Everyone's a bit tired. So even the chamber's a little bit grumpy. But I think outside, in the coffee shops, people are kind of worried. This is really challenging times. And also, I think the cancel culture that we're in. You know, and I've felt this for a long time. You know, I get really distressed actually by the cancel culture at university about, deplatforming and, yes, there are certain people who I don't think should be invited to speak at something like a university, Um, but actually, I think there's a lot of people you need to listen to and understand. And what we've seen with the cancel culture is, one person standing up and everyone cancel them. But then what happens when that turns on you? And it's a very negative place to be in terms of not listening to other people's views. And you should be able to disagree with people. Although, then that filters into the wider political frame where we're seeing so many wars going on around the world. It's pretty horrendous. But you know, I think there's something we really have to tackle on, freedom of speech. Again, on the other side, you hear people say, well, I've got freedom of speech. Well, you might have freedom of speech, but it's not freedom of consequences, and we need to be a little bit more tolerant in terms of, different people's views and understanding. Um, when I was at uni, you kind of relished listening to people who had different views of your own, because that was deemed really important rather than just shutting people down. And I do worry, um, you know, at the moment, I thought we'd be further on in our you know, women's rights and disability rights than we are, and women get shut down so quickly for having an opinion. And I just think that is really worrying.
Yeah, yeah. I find. I mean, I came from a secular world into a religious world, not being a Christian all my life, and just within the institution of the Church of England, the misogyny towards females. I've been staggered. I've been within it for 10 years, and I stay in it because I think you can affect change from within, and you can't affect change from uh, without. Just on the assisted suicide issue, Tanny.
Mm.
Um, what's your instincts about where this is going to finish? Where's the end line? No pun intended. And what's your own view, if you're happy to share it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very public in my view. I think changing the law is pretty bad. Because if you look at other jurisdictions around the world, pretty much all of them have changed, either through practice or through the court system. In Oregon, which seems to be the favoured country at the moment by those who want to change the law. It was Oregon for a bit, then it was Canada, then Canada's just gone completely off the wall and back to Oregon. It's in Oregon being a burden is one of the biggest reasons people request it. Now, for me, that's part of family life. And you know, uh, it it's really worrying in terms of I think how it changes our relationship with society, how it changes our relationship with doctors, and I think it's a pretty badly written bill. So whether it'll go through is going to be quite tough because our job is as a revising chamber, although there are a number of people who absolutely want this bill to stop. Um, I would very much prefer not to have this on the statute books because I'm worried about vulnerable people, coercive relationships. The bill doesn't look at anything really about checking for coercive relationships or anything like that. So it's a private member's bill. We've been told that because it's been through the Commons, we have to pass it. That's nonsense. We don't. Um, I think if this is what is wanted or needed, it has to be as safe as possible. Now, the trouble is when you quote opinion polls, you ask the public, quite a large percentage of people think this is a really good idea until you explain to them what it is. So most people think assisted dying is palliative care. Then you use the word assisted suicide. And to me, that's different because this is assisted suicide because you have to take the drugs. Um, uh, Assisted dying, actually, I think is a euphemism for euthanasia, where someone else does it. So, when you start talking about what it means, it drops and it drops really quickly. So I don't think there are, the population, crying out for this. I think there's a couple of campaign groups and there's some personalities who are saying that it's needed. But actually, when you talk to people, what they want is decent palliative care and decent support to end life and decent support to have quality life. But for me, where I worry is that, people look at me as a disabled person and they think my life has no value. So I have a very privileged life. But, I've had it said to me so many times, if my life was like yours, I'd want to kill myself. And I thinking, okay, so that's me. What about a disabled person who's struggling with no work, poor housing, poor social care, all these things? What happens to them? And I do think, we're mark of a society is how we treat our most vulnerable. And with this bill, our most vulnerable people will be under massive threat. And I do not think that is what actually most of society want. But it fits into, where we are at the moment. We're not happy times within society, within our politics. The way we talk about other people, it's not a happy place in the UK at the moment.
No, no, and I really appreciate your comments. I try not to give my opinion too much, but my father died from dementia, and there were moments in that illness where I thought, maybe, but actually, on reflection, that because that didn't happen, I spent some very real precious moments with my father, and I
Mm.
think I learned a lot about his condition. It gave me an empathy towards other people with it, and it taught me a lot about love. So it's just my two penneth, which I don't normally put into my own podcast, but there it is. And finally, Tanni, what's the view about around Westminster with what I think is the real potential that Nigel Farage and Reform could be the next government? That is a real cat among the pigeons at the moment, isn't it? And but you can't deny democracy, and if that's the will of the people, that's what will happen, and people are going to have to like it or lump it. What's the vibe down there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be naive not to recognise that reform have the potential to do very well in the next set of elections. So, got local elections next May, there's Senate elections in Wales next year. Based on the numbers at the moment, they look like they could take a large number of seats. And I think for lots of different reasons, uh, different people in reform are able to connect to the unrest in this country, are able to connect to people, and people want something different. They're really frustrated with the politics around at the moment, And I've had a few letters from people saying, that they're going to vote reform in the next election and explaining to me why. And I don't know, because they're, not people I know, and people saying, I'm, and it's interesting, some of them start with, I'm not racist, and I really don't, but I'm worried about illegal immigration, not legal migration. And I'm worried about these things. I'm worried about, health and social care, and I'm worried about the NHS. And, it's true, any party in opposition can say whatever it wants. It's really easy. And I think, the current government are struggling a little bit because it's easy to say what you're going to do in opposition. Then when you're the one in power, you've got to deliver it.
Mhm.
And at the moment, Reform can say pretty much whatever they want. And I think it ties into people's dissatisfaction with society. And I think, our major political parties need to just be aware. Westminster is a bubble and London is a bubble. And, the building, I mean, at the moment, it goes back 200 years. We've got gold on the roof, on the ceilings. You've got to get out of this building and talk to real people and understand. And I just think it's a little bit of a microcosm of, what happened in Brexit. You know, um, Actually, in the end, it shouldn't have been surprised that that's what people voted for, because I just don't. I think there was a very, just a view that we'll be all right. It's all right. The people will, just they'll see that we're okay. And Brexit, I think, has done untold damage to us.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, well, Baroness Dame, OBE, MBE,
Annie,
Mrs. It's been lovely talking to you. Just finally, when you're not in this bubble, what is your kind of, what do you like to do to chill? What's your kind of go-to kind of thing?
oh, I read, love reading, uh, and go out on my bike. Yeah, that's good. And eat lots of pasta.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope everybody's enjoyed this. Do check out the Godcast. There's lots of politicians, lots of sports people. But for now, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, thank you for coming on the Godcast.
Thank you.